Hi, I'm Sarah Cozart. I'm with Avant-Garde College Prep, and we're going to be looking at the May 2018 reading test today. So this is the first passage. This is the fiction passage that we're going to look at, and there isn't any extra information over here in the header other than it just being published in 1900 and being named Sister Carrie. So we're going to go ahead and go down to the questions first and look at these, diagnose them, decide if there's anything in the passage we need to mark up, and then we'll look for those items in the passage and then answer the questions. All right, throughout the passage, the narrator provides insight into Carrie's character mainly by. Now we're looking for an insight into Carrie's character, but it also says here throughout the passage. So this is going to be a main idea primary purpose question because it's asking us to find information that's spread throughout the passage. So at the end, we're going to ask ourselves, what are the ways that the narrator provides insight into Carrie's character? All right, number 2, one important theme of the passage developed through the narrator's presentation of Carrie. Okay, if we can get, this is also going to be basically a main idea primary purpose question, because it's something that's spread throughout the passage. It's kind of a purpose function because it's talking about the way, and this one really is too, because it's asking about how the narrator accomplishes his goals. But it's a little iffy to call these purpose function because they are referring to the entire passage. So we're still thinking about the techniques that the author used, but we're referring to the entire passage. So that's why I said MIPP first for these. So we're also looking for a theme of the passage based on how the narrator presents Carrie. All right, so circle this word in context in line 2, the word stirred. Let's see, stirred right here. Another purpose function, what main effect, that's why we know it's purpose function, do the words knickknacks, line 8, and concoctions in line 26 have on the passage? All right, so knickknacks, line 8. So remember, these are not words in context questions, but we're asking what effect the word knickknacks and concoctions has on the passage, these two words. The main purpose of the series of questions in the first paragraph is to, another purpose function question. So we don't need to underline every question because the first paragraph has a lot of questions, but we are going to put a bracket down here, and we're remembering to figure out what is the purpose of these questions. So I'm just going to underline a couple of the question marks so that we remember to figure out what the purpose of these questions might be. All right, now we have a COE question that is not related to the previous. What choice provides the best evidence the narrator, well, actually we don't need to worry about it right now. We will look at that after we have gone through the passage. Now we have a COE pair, so we don't need to look at these right now either. All right, now we have 2 standalone C&C questions. So we are going to need to pay attention to these, most likely because these are presented at the end of the questions. The answers, or the information to give the answers, will be near the end. So this one will probably be found right near the end, and number 9 will probably be found a little bit before that. According to the passage, as Carrie views the play, so as she views the play, she envies which aspect? Okay, so when we're in the part where it's talking about her viewing the play, what is the aspect of the characters' lives that she envies? And then we're also going to look for, according to the passage, Carrie judges the performance of the actress who played the hero's sweetheart as. So it's basically, what is Carrie's opinion of the, probably the main actress, the one who played the hero's sweetheart. And that information is going to be found after we find the information about how what she envies about the lives of the characters in the play. All right, so we'll go through and look at this words in context. We'll look at these 2 purpose function questions, and then look at these 2 C&C questions, the information about them in the passage, and then we will go on to answer all the questions. All right, first, the word in context. It was not often that she came to the play stirred to her heart's core by actualities. Okay, one suggestion or clue here is to her heart's core. So if she was If she was stirred, she's the one who was stirred. That was not straight. If she's the one who is stirred, then we know that the stirring is something that happens inside a person, and it happens all the way to her heart's core. So most likely this is not going to be a physical stirring, like stirring a cake batter, but it is going to be something emotional or mental. But we do need to keep looking because we don't have a whole lot of context. Today, a low song of longing, okay, that's helpful, had been singing in her heart, stirred to her heart's core, a song of longing in her heart, by the finery, the merriment, the beauty she had seen. Okay, so there's some sort of emotion that is stirring in her heart that is similar to longing. Now, we were looking at the purpose of all of these questions. So we're going to just read a few of the questions and see if we can figure out what purpose they serve. Oh, these women who had passed her by, hundreds and hundreds strong, who were they? Whence came the rich, elegant dresses, the astonishingly colored buttons, the knickknacks of silver and gold? Where were these lovely creatures housed? Amid what elegancies of carved furniture, decorated walls, elaborate tapestries did they move? Here's another question. Where were their rich apartments, loaded with all that money could provide? In what stables champed these sleek, nervous horses, and rested the gorgeous carriages? Where lounged the richly groomed footmen? Oh, the mansions, the lights, the perfume, the loaded boudoirs and tables. New York must be filled with such bowers, or the beautiful, insolent, supercilious creatures could not be. Some hothouses held them. It ached her to know that she was not one of them, that, alas, she had dreamed a dream and it had not come true. So it looks like we've gotten to the end of those questions here. So what's she doing with these questions? It introduces her by saying, after she saw this play, she had this sort of longing in her heart. And it was these beautiful things that she sees, presumably just in her daily life as she sees people going by, of women who are dressed beautifully, who have beautiful jewelry. She's imagining what their houses are like. She's imagining where they keep their horses and just how incredible all of their lives must be. And then she says, she's just sort of rhapsodizing about how everything was so beautiful. And then she thinks New York must be filled with such bowers. A bower could be something kind of like a garden, or it could be where a maiden would live. Or the beautiful, insolent, supercilious creatures, these are the women that she's thinking of, could not be. Some hothouses held them. She's also calling them basically kind of like flowers, because hothouses are more like greenhouses. So all these questions are sort of her wondering about where these beautiful people come from and how glamorous their lives must be. All right, let's look at knickknacks here. Whence came the rich, elegant dresses, the astonishingly colored buttons, the knickknacks of silver and gold? A knickknack is not usually a word that we would use to describe something that was silver and gold. A knickknack is some cheap thing that you might buy when you're on vacation and bring home and put on your shelf. But it's not usually a word that we would use for something truly expensive and worthwhile. So the word knickknack here seems out of place. Let's see if we can figure out, because knickknack seems to communicate that something is not of worth, and yet we have silver and gold here, which doesn't seem to go with knickknack. So let's look at concoctions. The play was one of those drawing-room concoctions in which charmingly overdressed ladies and gentlemen suffer the pangs of love and jealousy amid gilded surroundings. A concoction usually is used to discuss something to eat or drink. So it might be a frothy pink drink with an umbrella in it, or it might be a cake that's covered with whipped cream and fruit, or something sort of glamorous and fluffy. The main idea with concoction is that it doesn't have a lot of substance. It's not something that would be nourishing. It might be sweet and enjoyable, but it's not something that would be something that would stick with you. So using the word concoction for a play and with charmingly overdressed ladies, it basically makes it seem like it's it's fluffy and maybe sticky sweet. And so the narrator is using these words. He or she uses this word concoction, Theodore Dreiser, so it's a man, and the word knickknacks to describe these things that the character herself is really enjoying, but he's kind of knocking them down a little bit by calling the silver and gold on these ladies knickknacks, and by calling this play that Carrie loves so much a concoction. So that's where we're going to go with that. And now we're looking for, as Carrie views the play, she ended the characters' lives. Let's go up here. So up here on the second paragraph, the characters, have the charm of showing suffering under ideal conditions. Who would not grieve upon a gilded chair? So this is her thoughts right here. Who would not want to do this? Basically saying, yes, I would like to grieve upon a gilded chair. Meaning, even if I'm grieving, doing it on a gilded chair makes it seem a lot easier. Who would not suffer amid perfumed tapestries, cushioned furniture, and liveried servants in uniform? Grief under such circumstances becomes an enticing thing. Carrie longed to be of it. So she wanted to take her sufferings, whatever they were, in such a world, or, failing that, at least to simulate them under such charming conditions upon the stage. Here is the answer to the question. What she envied, she wanted to take her sufferings, whatever they may be, in such a world. She wanted to suffer in this rich world that the characters on the stage were suffering. Okay, and now we're looking for her judging the performance of the actress who played the hero's sweetheart. That was in this last paragraph over here. And she says, in her mind were running the scenes of the play. Particularly, she remembered one beautiful actress, start here, the sweetheart who had been wooed and won. The grace of this woman had won Carrie's heart. Her dresses had been all that art could suggest. Her sufferings had been so real. So that means that she thinks it was a good performance. The anguish which she had portrayed, Carrie could feel. Okay, again, saying she was acting so well that Carrie could feel her anguish. It was done or performed as she, Carrie, was sure she could do it. So here's where we're starting to see the performance. Can't draw this line. The performance was done in a way that Carrie thought that she could do it, meaning Carrie thinks, I could probably do it. And then we have this. There were places in which she could even do better. So Carrie's saying this performance by this actress was so wonderful that it made me feel all these things. I'm pretty sure I could perform like that. In fact, I think there were some spots where I could have done it better than this actress. Okay, so let's actually put a star here so we remember to look here, and we need to go back up here. Forgot, and put a star here for those two C&C questions. All right, let's try to answer the questions. The question, throughout the passage, the narrator provides insight into Carrie's character mainly by. Now with these main idea questions, it's easier to toss some of the questions out because they are inaccurate or too specific, meaning they only show up in one or two locations. So let's see if we can toss anything out. Explaining how Carrie is similar to a character she sees in a play. The narrator does not do that. She doesn't say Carrie is like this person. She says Carrie wants to be, he, the narrator, says Carrie wants to be like this person, but does not say that Carrie is like this person. Developing a contrast between how Carrie perceives herself and how she is perceived by others. We may get how Carrie perceives herself, but we don't get how she's perceived by others. That's nowhere in the passage. Comparing Carrie's actual appearance to her perceptions of her appearance. I don't believe we get Carrie's actual appearance in the passage. Again, we don't get perceived by others, including her appearance. Here we go. Juxtaposing Carrie's perceptions of the city and her impressions at the theater. Yep, that is what we are talking about. So her perceptions of the city are affected by how she felt at the theater. All right, one important theme of the passage developed throughout the narrator's presentation of Carrie is, so this theme has to come in the way the narrator presents Carrie. Natural talent will languish if it remains unnourished. He doesn't say anything about Carrie's natural talent in any particular area. It does say that up here that she wondered if her own solitude these 2 years past, that she had never achieved what she had expected. So I guess she has some sort of talent. She maybe thinks that she would be a good actress. The theme is not that talent will languish if it remains unnourished. The theme is how Carrie is thinking about other people. Imagined pleasures have the power to make everyday life seem unacceptable. Now that seems to go a little bit better because she is imagining all these pleasures. And later it does say that her everyday life seemed unacceptable. Down here, let's see. Flowers, women were spending money like water. We're at 55. She could see that in every elegant shop she passed. Flowers, candy, jewelry seemed the principal things in which the elegant dames were interested. And she had scarcely enough pin money to indulge in such outings as this, as going to the play, a few times a month. That night, the pretty little flat seemed a commonplace thing. It was not what the rest of the world was enjoying. So that seems to work. It seems to be that most of the passage is her envying these other people. And she's unhappy with what she has. Let's look at these other two just to be sure. No goal is unfeasible so long as it is pursued with stubborn persistence. Nope, it doesn't show her pursuing a goal with stubborn persistence. Relationships are ultimately more important than money in determining an individual's happiness. Well, Carrie certainly doesn't seem to think so. She seems to think that she needs money to be happy. So we're going to go with B. All right, stirred. Remember we said it was something related to an emotion and something related to longing. So it's not going to be angered. Moved looks good. Prodded, I don't think it's prodded because that means someone else is pushing her to feel a particular way. Encouraged, I don't think it's encouraged because she's longing for something. So moved. Moved seems to be the correct answer here. Okay, what effect do the words knickknacks and concoctions have on the passage? Remember we were saying that knickknacks seemed out of place with the silver and gold, and the concoction was kind of saying something a little bit disparaging, not terribly flattering about the play. So the narrator is saying knickknacks and concoctions, even though Carrie thinks. All right, so what effect do those words have? They underscore the widespread popularity of the things being described? No, it doesn't say anywhere that those knickknacks and that the play was widespread popular. They provide insight into the causes underlying Carrie's materialistic mindset. Okay, it does give us her materialistic mindset, but does it tell us why? Does it tell us why she's so interested in this? It does not. They emphasize how little value Carrie actually attaches to the things she appears to covet. No, she really does want these things, and she really does think that they have value. They suggest that the things Carrie is observing ought to be regarded as trivial. There we go. Trivial means unimportant. And so the narrator is suggesting that Carrie sees all these things that she thinks are so wonderful, but that they're actually not that great. So the narrator's trying to show that Carrie is wrong about these things. The main purpose of the series of questions in the first paragraph, remember we said that she was doing some imagining about all the people that she saw in New York. Reveal Carrie's ignorance of the women's private struggles. No, there's nothing about the private struggles there at all, whether Carrie's ignorant of them or not. Capture the scene's authenticity by providing detailed descriptions of the women. That's not really why those questions are there. It's not there to provide descriptions. It's more there to show us Carrie's inner life. Emphasize the narrator's contempt for the women's displays of affluence. No, the narrator may be subtly mocking some of the things that Carrie likes so much, but he's not mocking the women who have all the money. Develop the narrator's portrayal of Carrie's intense admiration of privileged women. There we go. Yes, she's very admiring of women of privilege. All right, now standalone COE. The best evidence that the narrator does not share Carrie's view of the type of play that Carrie attends. So we already have an idea. The narrator does not share Carrie's view of the play. We already have an idea from this question over here that knickknacks and concoctions, especially concoction, when we're talking about the play, means that the narrator thought the play was not really anything of substance, even though Carrie was obsessed with it. So we're trying to find something that helps us see that the narrator was not a huge fan of this play. So let's look at 20 to 22. It ached her to know that she was not one of them, that alas, she had dreamed a dream and it had not yet come true. No, because that's not talking about Carrie's view of the play. It's talking about Carrie's view of the affluent women. 28 to 31. Okay, such bon mots, that means little nuggets of deliciousness, are ever enticing to those who have all their days longed for such material surroundings and have never had them gratified. Okay, I think this is going to be the answer, because what he's saying is the play, such bon mots, it's this play here. Bon mots is, again, like concoctions, a word that makes things, communicates the lack of depth in a piece of art or even in a piece of food. And so he's saying such bon mots, such little fluffy plays like this are ever enticing to those who have all their days longed for such material surroundings and have never had them gratified. So the point of these plays, the narrator seems to suggest, is that people who want to be rich, like the characters in the plays, are the people who enjoy the play the most, and that's who it entices. And he's kind of hinting that maybe nobody else would be enticed. So 28 to 31. 39 to 41. Let's see. So affected was her mind, Carrie's mind, by what she had seen that the play now seemed an extraordinarily beautiful thing. Now that's Carrie's opinion. It's not evidence that the narrator does not share Carrie's opinion. It just tells us that Carrie thought the play was beautiful. 41 to 43. Between the acts, she studied the galaxy of matinee attendants in front rows and boxes and conceived a new idea of the possibilities of New York. Nope, that's too far. 41. She was soon lost in the world it represented and wished that she might never return. Again, that tells us that Carrie really loved the play and she was lost in its world, but it doesn't give a hint that the narrator does not share Carrie's view. So, B is the correct answer. Now, if you come across something like this where you don't know what bon mots means, you could still get rid of these answers because it give us either over here, A does not give us any view of the play, and over here it only gives us Carrie's view of the play. It does not give us any idea of what the narrator might think. But this is the only statement. You could say such blanks are ever enticing to those who have all their days. He's giving a statement about the play right there. All right, based on the passage, so this is a C&C question, Carrie regards her day-to-day lifestyle as one that has, so we're looking at this with the COE, what we need evidence of how she thinks about her day-to-day lifestyle, okay? So we've got to have Carrie's thoughts about her day-to-day lifestyle in the evidence. 22 to 24. She wondered at her own solitude these 2 years past, her indifference to the fact that she had never achieved what she expected. Okay, that could be something about her day-to-day because it's that she is alone for the past 2 years, and then her indifference, meaning her lack of interest or motivation, even though she knows that she didn't achieve her dreams. So that could be it. 36 to 39, her opinions on her day-to-day lifestyle. Carrie longed to be of it. Now this is the world of the play. She wanted to take her sufferings, whatever they were, in such a world, or failing that, at least to simulate them under such charming stage. She wanted this, but it's not actually what her day-to-day lifestyle was like, so we can cross that out. 49 to 50. The scene she had witnessed coming down was now augmented and at its height. Okay, we need to look at a little bit more context. Going out, the same Broadway taught her a sharper lesson. The scene that she had witnessed coming down was now augmented and at its height, meaning she now noticed more the beautiful women and the finery. Such a crush of finery and folly she had never seen. It clinched her convictions concerning her state. Okay, the only sentence we're supposed to look at here is the scene she had witnessed coming down was now augmented and at its height. It just means she was more aware of the beauty and finery of all the women around her, but it doesn't give us an opinion of her own day-to-day lifestyle. 56 to 58. Flowers, candy, jewelry seemed to be the principal things in which the elegant dames were interested. That's talking about the things that the rich women liked to buy, but it's not talking about Carrie's lifestyle. So that means this is the answer. So let's go back and read that. She wondered at her own solitude these 2 years past. We'll put a little bracket around here. Her indifference to the fact that she had never achieved what she had expected. So she's sitting here having a little bit of introspection. She had dreamed this dream to become rich like these women, and then realizes that she's been alone for the past 2 years and she hasn't really worked hard to achieve that dream. So how does this match up with number 7? Carrie regards her day-to-day lifestyle as one that has not been conducive to helping achieve her ambitions. That could work. Followed a repetitive but productive pattern. We don't have anything in that quote about being repetitive but productive. Allowed for interactions with a range of interesting people. This is the opposite because it says she's had the solitude for the past 2 years. Facilitated her goals as an actress. Nope, because she has not achieved her dreams. So A is the correct answer. Now we have these standalone C&Cs that we already know where the answer is located. We just have to match them up with the correct answer. What aspect of the characters' lives does she envy? And that was up here. She longed to be of it. She wanted to take her sufferings, whatever they were, in such a world, in a world of gilded chairs and cushioned furniture and perfumed tapestries. Okay, so she envies their lack of everyday problems. No, because they did have sufferings. They just had it in a fancy place. Their ability to forget the past easily and focus on the present. That's not what's talked about up there. Their opportunity to bear their sufferings in fortunate circumstances. That sounds right. Their open indifference to material possessions. Absolutely not. They love their material possessions. So C is correct. And now the performance of the actress Carrie, who played the hero's sweetheart. How does Carrie judge that performance? And over here, Carrie says, I think I could have done it as well as she did, and maybe even better. So Carrie judges that performance as inferior in certain respects to the performance that she, Carrie, believes herself to be capable of giving. That sounds right. Let's just look at these others. The dissatisfying in its emphasis on physical grace over emotional authenticity? No, because over here it talks about the grace of the woman had won Carrie's heart, and the anguish which she had portrayed, Carrie could feel. So that's the emotional authenticity. Clumsy and melodramatic? No, because it said that the grace of the woman had won her heart. Yet superior to the other actors' performances. Doesn't say that she was superior. Difficult to watch because of the intense suffering it evoked. It does not say that. So A is the correct answer. So that's the end of passage 1 on the May 2018 reading test. Now we are moving on to passage 2, which is the social science passage, and it does have a graph. So this is one that theoretically you could have done as an eject chord passage. Don't really get a whole lot from the header here. The title is Joy, Guilt, Anger, Love. What neuroscience can and can't tell us about how we feel. So let's just jump over to the questions and start diagnosing. The main is 2. So that's an MIPP question. And we're just going to consider the purpose as we read the passage. As used in line 19, operate most nearly means words in context. Let's circle operate in line 19. All right, now here's a standalone COE question, so we don't need to consider it as we're reading the passage. And now here's a standalone inference question. This one is really tricky, so I'll spend some time walking y'all through it. The results of Abraham's experiments showed. Okay, so they describe 2 experiments in the passage, and we are looking for what the results show. There are several locations where you can find what the results show, and what you're really going to have to do is match up what the results show in different spots of the passage with one of the answers that you have here. This is one of the really tricky inference and suggestion questions. The greatest increase, note, this is a COE pair, so we do not need to worry about this one right now. All right, according to the passage, the brain stores information about famous real people. Okay, this is a standalone CNC, so we're looking for how or where the brain stores information about famous real people. So we'll pay attention to that, somewhere probably after line 19. It's used in line 80. Alien most nearly means. All right, so we'll go and circle alien in line 80. And then these are both graph questions. So let's start talking about this inference question. It can reasonably be inferred from the passage that the results of Abraham's experiments showed that. If you have a standalone inference question and you can't find a really obvious place where the topic is discussed, it can't hurt to read the answers and see if you can knock any out, because you're saying, I know that there was no inference that XYZ happened. So let's see if we can find a couple of the places that talk about what was shown by the experiment. We did get this. The results were intriguing, so that seems to be helpful. We'll put a star there. And then we've got common to both types of situation with some level of mental activity in parts of the brain, such as the hippocampus, that are at work when we in general recall facts or events. And so the both types of situation refers to a real person named Peter involving a situation including either George Bush or Cinderella. One set, he just receives information about one or the other, or just about both of them. And the other set of situations, he's interacting. This character named Peter. Okay, so this is one set of results. And then we also get, there were striking finer distinctions in activity relative to the 2 scenarios, and these depended on the type of character involved. So that's another bit of results. And then this describes that. And really what is going on in the next couple of paragraphs is the description of what is found. And so remember, with inference questions, we can't give an answer that just is saying this is true. So if there are any of the answer options that are too straightforward or too well connected, really word for word or concept to concept, with some of the information in the passage, that would not be the correct answer. We'd actually have to infer it. So this is just the next two paragraphs or three paragraphs are just explaining everything about this this section here, the striking finer distinctions in activity relative to the two scenarios, and they depended on the type of character involved. So that's really what the rest of the passage is about, where it's talking about the differences between how the brain stores or recalls information about someone who is real and how it recalls information about someone who is fictional. So there's not really a great thing about the results except for right here. So I think that's what we're going to go with for being the main spot that we're going to get information. The researchers give a following explanation, but that is a little bit off of our topic. So what we have here is the results were intriguing to both types of situation with some level of mental activity in which the parts of the brain such as the hippocampus that are at work when we in general recall facts or events. Okay, so both types of situation, they use the brain where we recall facts or events. Okay, so what did the results of the experiment show? A, interactive scenarios resulted in finer distinctions in brain activity than informative scenarios. That's incorrect, because here, where it talks about finer distinctions, the activity was between the type of character. Those are the finer distinctions. And it doesn't say that informative versus interactive had finer or less fine distinctions. Both interactive and informative scenarios required memory recall. That seems to work with what we have up here, that they use the part of the brain when we recall facts or events. Informative scenarios were more likely to be considered possible than were interactive scenarios. I don't think we get any information about that, whether it was likely to be considered possible. That's what they're being asked to do, but I don't know that we get information about informative versus interactive being likely to be considered possible. We just can't infer that information. All scenarios yielded some unclassifiable brain activity. I don't think we have enough information to answer that question either, or to choose that answer. So we're going to go with both interactive and informative scenarios required memory recall. All right, here's that COE pair. Actually, let's go through the ones that are in the passage first. According to the passage, the brain stores information about famous real people, how or where. Now that's up here. As predicted, the activation, let's see, we've got these three things. The characters involved in the scenarios were ranked in three categories with differing degrees of personal relevance for their participants. Friends or family, famous people, so this would be the famous real people, and fictional characters. As predicted, the activation in the AMPFC and PCC was indeed proportionally modulated, so by the degree of relevance of the characters described. So that, and then they're going to describe what they mean here. It was highest in the case of friends and family members and lowest in the case of fictional characters. So that means the activity in the AMPFC and the PCC was moderate for famous real people, but that doesn't tell us where it stores the information. Up here we get that the fact that George Bush was linked to personal memory retrieval, but Cinderella was not. So we're still not sure about where it stores the information. So down here, the researchers gave the following explanation. When you encounter real characters, even if you have never met them, so this is the famous real people, okay? They will integrate into a wide, comprehensive, and intricately connected structure in the conceptual storage of your mind. You are familiar with their basic behavioral features as human beings. You know more or less how they think, what kind of opinions they may produce. You are aware of the range of emotions that you can expect from them. By contrast, your mind is not equally familiar with fictional characters. Okay, so non-fictional characters are, even if they're real people that you have never met, are going to be storing information in a more similar way to people that you are close to than to fictional characters. No matter how much we know about the world of a fictional character, there will still be something alien and inscrutable, we'll get to alien in a second, to us about that world. You may have read all the books about a fictional character, but the amount of information you have gathered about that character is still definitely limited compared with the members of your family Oh, compared with the wealth of information that is available to you about, so we've got limited, compared with the wealth of information that is available to you about members of your family, friends, or famous real people who are part of your immediate experience. Okay, so give us enough information. We can look there and there for the answer. So the brain stores information about famous real people, what? In order to allow efficient retrieval later. It doesn't talk about how to allow a retrieval. Exactly as it stores information about close friends or family members. I think they said it was a little bit different. In different areas, depending on the type of contact, no. It didn't seem to differentiate depending on the type of contact. But here, in a network of memories broader in scope than memories about fictional people. Yes, that is exactly true. And that's what it says down. About fictional people, the information is limited compared with the wealth of information that is available to you about famous real people. And then it says, memories about famous real people will integrate into a wide, comprehensive, and intricately connected structure in the conceptual storage of your mind. So yes, information about famous real people will be stored in a network of memories broader in scope than memories about fictional people. All right, let's go back to alien. No matter how much we know about the world of a fictional character, there will still be something alien and inscrutable. Okay, so we're going to use this and inscrutable to help us understand. Inscrutable means very difficult to understand or hard to see into. And so alien is going to have to be something like hard to know or hard to understand, or where we just don't have enough information, something like that. So it's not inconsistent. That's not the problem. Foreign could work. Extraterrestrial is not what we're talking about here. Complex doesn't necessarily have the hard to understand or hard to know, but foreign seems to work better. Really what we're looking for is an idea of different. Okay, let's go back and do the main idea. Oh, we skipped the word and context question for line 19. Whoops. How does the brain operate when assessing these two different types of scenarios? Okay, we're talking about the brain doing the operating. It doesn't seem to suggest that it's manipulating anything. It doesn't seem to suggest that it's exercising. I think function is what we're going for. And conducting, you would need an object. How does the brain conduct something for conduct to work? Okay, so now we have gone through everything that we questions. The main purpose of the passage is to, okay, what does this passage do? Advocate for more research on how the brain connects real and fictional events. I don't think it does that at any point. Inform the reader about the results of experiments on brain function. That does seem to be what it's doing. Explore how the brain processes factual information. It does that, but it also explores how it processes fictional information, so that cannot work. Argue that the way the brain processes fictional situations is widely misunderstood. That's not all it does. It also talks about processing factual information, so B is the only one that's accurate. All right, the COE. Which choice best supports the claim that there are important similarities? Okay, so the claim is similarities between how the brain responds to scenarios involving real people and how it responds to those involving fictional people. Okay, so what we're looking for is evidence that there are similarities between how the brain responds to the scenarios with real people and the scenarios with fictional people. 21 to 24. The results were intriguing. Common to both types. Okay, this gives us the similarities. Both types of situation. Let's go up here and double check. The other set of, let's see. We've got scenarios in which a real person named Peter was involved in situations that included George Bush or Cinderella. In one set of situations, he simply received information. The other set of situations involved direct interactions with the characters. Okay, so those are the sets of situations. They're either interactive or informational, and he's going to get information or interaction with George Bush or Cinderella. So we've got both types of scenarios. Common to both types of situation was some level of mental activity. We've already looked at this. In parts of the brain, such as the hippocampus, that are at work when we, in general, recall facts or events. I think that's going to be very helpful for us for this question, because it's supporting the claim that there are similarities between how the brain responds to scenarios involving real people and fictional people. 29 to 32. However, there were a few striking finer distinctions. Nope, that's not going to help us because we're not looking for information about differences. We're looking for information about similarities. 72 to 77. Let's see. You are familiar with their basic behavioral features. This is about the famous real people. as human beings. You know more or less how they think, what kind of opinions they produce. You are aware of the range of emotions that you can expect from them. That's only talking about famous real people and how you think about them. It's not talking about similarities between how we think about them and how we think about fictional people. 81 to 88. Now we're talking about fictional people. You may have read all the books about a fictional character, but the amount of information you have gathered about that character is still definitely limited compared with the wealth of information that is available to you about members of your family, friends, or famous real people who are part of your immediate and past experience. So that's not talking about similarities between how we respond to both. It's talking about differences. So A is the only one that gives us a similarity. All right, and then we just have the COE pair and those two graph questions to look at. The greatest increased activity in the AMPFC of a research subject's brain would most likely be observed in scenarios in which a real protagonist. Okay, so what we're looking for in this evidence is an increase in the AMPFC. So it's got to talk about an increase in the activity of the AMPFC, and it's got to be linked to something about, we've got to have information about that increase and a real protagonist. So let's look at these pieces of evidence. 11 to 12. In one set of situations, Peter simply received information about both characters. That doesn't give us any information about the AMPFC, so we're going to have to get rid of that one. 56 to 62. However, this time the characters involved in the scenarios were ranked in 3 categories with differing degrees of personal relevance for the participants. Their friends or family, high personal relevance, famous people, medium relevance, and fictional characters, low personal relevance. That just describes how they were setting up the experiment, but it doesn't tell us about elevated or increased brain activity in the AMPFC. 62 to 64. As predicted, the activation, here we go, in the AMPFC and PCC was indeed proportionally modulated by the degree of relevance of the characters described. Okay, proportionally modulated means in proportion with, depending on the kind of character described, the activity changed. And now we get an explanation for that. Even though this is our piece of evidence, we can look elsewhere or around the evidence to help us understand the evidence better. It was highest in the case of friends and family members and lowest in the case of fictional characters. So if we're talking about a real protagonist, it was highest in the case of friends and family, so those are real. And then remember when we looked at this before, we decided that it was in between for real famous people. So there we have information about activation in the AMPFC being, what was the question? It would most likely be, the greatest increase would most likely be observed in scenarios in which a real protagonist something. So we get information about that there. Let's just double check 72 to 74. You are familiar with their basic behavioral features as human beings. That's not talking about activation in the AMPFC, so we can get rid of that. So our answer to the evidence is C. And now we're looking at a hypothetical situation based on the fact that the highest activation in the AMPFC was with close friend family, and the lowest was with fictional, and the famous real people were in the middle. So how can we answer this question? The greatest increase in activity in the AMPFC of a research subject's brain would most likely be observed in scenarios in which a real protagonist, what? Has a conversation with a real person who is unknown to the subject? Possibly. But that would be in between. That would be the middle. Interacts with real people who are childhood friends of the subjects. That does seem to be a better option. Encounters a fictional character about whom the subject is quite knowledgeable. Nope, because fictional characters had the lowest activation in the AMPFC. Is told about a real person the subject has previously met. That would go in between. That would be in the middle. But having a conversation with a real person who is unknown to the subject would also be in the middle. And so the highest activation would be interacting with real people who are childhood friends of the subject, because we get the activation was proportionally modulated by the degree of relevance, and then they describe that. It was highest in the case of friends and family members. All right, let's look at these graphs. They're just talking about the percent change in activity in the PCC, and then the percent change in activity in the IFG. And then we've got these different scenarios: real people informative, real people active, fictional informative, fictional interactive, and the same down here. According to Figure 1, the percent increase in the activity in the PCC in subjects reacting to a scenario in which someone has a conversation, so this would be interactive, a conversation with a real person. So we're looking for real people interactive percent increase, and real people interactive is black. So the percent increase looks to be between 10 and 15. And here we go, we've got a 13. That works. According to Figure 1 and Figure 2, the highest percent change in activity in any of the studied areas. Okay, any parts of the brain. So it could be in the PCC or the IFG. So we're looking for the highest percent change between the two graphs. Was in what? So what's the highest percent change? Up here we only go up to 20% and down here we go to 30%. And that is the change in the IFG. And it's the gray bar with fictional characters interacting. So that's the one that gives us the highest percent change in activity, because here our highest is only about 13, but here our highest is 30. So we're looking for change in the IFG with fictional characters interacting. So we're going to get rid of these PCC answers because we know those are not the correct ones. All right. IFG when the subjects were exposed to an interactive scenario involving fictional people. That sounds right. IFG when the subjects were exposed to an interactive scenario involving real people. No, that is not when the IFG changed. It was when they were exposed to an interactive scenario involving real people. Sorry, fictional people. All right, that is the end of passage 2, and we will come back in a moment for passage 3. Passages. The title is The Genes That Turned Wildcats into Kitty Cats. So that may help us if we have any kind of main idea question. All right, we do. The main purpose of this passage is to. So let's diagnose this. We'll pay attention to that as we read. The author includes the phrase "and well" in line 4, most likely to purpose function. We'll go circle and well. The passage suggests this is a COE pair. We won't worry about it while we're reading. Let's double check. That's not a COE. Okay. So number 25. Which choice best describes how Montague's team achieved the results discussed in the 6th paragraph? Okay, so let's bracket the 6th paragraph and we'll try to pay attention to how they achieved the results. 52 to 67. So that's this paragraph here. All right, passage. This is another COE pair. According to the passage, okay, this is a standalone, the discovery that some genes in domestic cats influence the migration of neural crest cells is important because neural crest cells are. Okay, so we've got to have something in this question. This is a CNC question. We've got to find somewhere in the passage that talks about that some genes in domestic cats influence the migration of neural crest cells. And then in 83, we'll circle common traits. Right there. And then the author most likely includes the quotation in the last sentence of the passage too. So this was words in context. And this is purpose function. Let's find that last sentence. There's a quotation in the last sentence right here. Okay, so as we look through the passage, we're paying attention to the main idea. We're paying attention to the purpose of the phrase "and well" in line 4. We're paying attention to how Montague's team achieved the results described in the 6th paragraph. And we're paying at the end of the passage, probably after the 6th paragraph actually, and before line 83, the discovery that some genes in domestic cats influence. We're looking for migration of neural crest cells. We're looking for common traits in line 83, and we're looking for the purpose of the quotation at the very end. All right, let's start with the purpose of the phrase "and well." Let's start from the beginning here. Place a house cat next to its direct ancestor, the Near Eastern wildcat, and it may take you a minute to spot the difference. They're about the same size and shape, and, well, they both look like cats. But the wildcat is fierce and feral, whereas the house cat, thanks to nearly 10,000 years of domestication, is tame and adaptable enough to have become the world's most popular pet. Okay, so what he's doing here is giving you a hypothetical of a Near Eastern wildcat and a regular house cat, and then showing how similar they are. They're about the same size and shape, and well, they both look like cats. Okay. The next thing we need to look for is how Montague's team achieved the results described in the 6th paragraph. Let's just read that paragraph. The most intriguing findings came when the team sequenced the genomes, okay, of 22 domestic cats and compared them with the genomes of 2 Near Eastern and 2 European wildcats. So that describes what they did. Let's read on. The researchers uncovered at least 13 genes that changed as the cats morphed from feral to friendly. Some of these, based on previous studies of knockout mice, genetically engineered mice, seem to play a role in cognition, including fear responses and the ability to learn new behaviors when given food rewards. That jives with what we know about the domestication of cats, Montague says, because they would have needed to become less fearful of new locations and individuals, and the promise of food would have kept them sticking around. Okay, so how did they achieve these results? They got the results that showed these particular genes that play a role in cognition, fear responses, and ability to learn new behaviors. But how they did this is this information here. They sequenced the genomes of 22 domestic cats, that representing a wide variety of breeds and locations, and compared them with the genomes of the 2 Near Eastern and 2 European wildcats. So that's what they did. All right, now we need to look for information about the migration of neural crest cells, and that is down here. The team also found 5 genes in domestic cats that influence the migration of neural crest cells. Stem cells in the developing embryo that affect everything from skull shape to coat color. This supports a recent proposal that such cells, these neural crest cells, may be the master control switches of domestication. That seems like it would be helpful and important. Explaining why domestic animals share common traits, such as smaller brains and certain pigmentation patterns. Okay, so we know where we're going to find the answer to the question about the neural crest cells. Now let's look at common traits. We've got an example of common traits that these domestic animals share, such as smaller brains and certain pigmentation patterns. So now we have this example of common traits, and this just is going to mean some sort of physical characteristics, because a smaller brain is a physical characteristic, and so is a pigmentation pattern. All right, so we looked at common traits, we looked at the migration of neural crest cells, and now, why did the author include the quotation in the last sentence of the passage? That is up here. The quotation is, "Cats were not selected for a purpose like dogs and other domesticates." Let's look up above a little higher. Whoops, over here. Co-author William Murphy, a geneticist at Texas A&M University College Station, says the cat genome appears to have undergone less intense and more recent evolutionary pressure than that of dogs. That's not surprising, considering that dogs may have lived with us for up to 30,000 years. Now, in contrast, cats were not selected for a purpose, meaning selected by people and used for a purpose like dogs and other domesticates. Other domesticates would be like cows, horses, sheep, goats, those kinds of animals. So cats weren't selected by people for any particular purpose. So that's what's saying there, and we'll look in a minute at why the author may have included that quote. Okay, let's look at the main purpose of the passage. Is it to summarize a study of the genetic differences between various breeds of domestic cats? No, because we're talking about how feral or ancient cats, wild cats, became domestic, not talking about the differences between domestic cats. Describe findings regarding the benefits that cats provided to humans as a result of domestication. No, we don't have anything about the benefits that cats provided to humans once they're domesticated. Is it to discuss research into the genetic changes that cats underwent as part of domestication? That sounds right. Let's try this one. Is it to present experimental evidence contrasting the behavior of wild cats and domestic cats? It is not giving us an experiment that contrasts the behavior. They did experiments they looked at their genes, but they didn't experiment on behavior. So the correct answer is C, discuss research into the genetic changes that cats underwent as a part of domestication. All right, why did the author include this phrase, "and well"? To stress that the relationship between wild cats and domestic cats is continually shifting? No, what he's trying to do here is show how similar they look, how similar wild cats and domestic cats can look. Introduces a discussion of the physical attributes of domestic cats? No, because that's not what he does. Right here talks about the process of domestication and the genetic changes, but doesn't introduce a discussion of physical attributes. Advance a tentative hypothesis about the evolution and development of wild cats? Nope, there's no tentative hypothesis about the development of wild cats. the hypothesis that he's going to talk about is how domestic cats became domestic. So, D, acknowledge the obviousness of a similarity between wild cats and domestic cats. And yes, they're about the same size and shape and, well, they look like cats. They both look like cats. So yes, he's acknowledging the obviousness. Here's the COE pair. The passage suggests, so we've got an INS first, that some scientists, okay, what is it suggesting? Something about some scientists would agree with which statement about the domestication of cats? Okay, so we've got, in the evidence, we've got to have something about scientists' opinions about cat domestication. Let's look at these options. 25 to 28. There, many scientists suspect, okay, we've got scientists, they mostly domesticated themselves. Who is they? Okay, wild cats who slunk out of the deserts and into villages. Okay, scientists suspect the cats mostly domesticated themselves, with the friendliest ones able to take advantage of human table scraps and protection. That sounds good because it sounds like something that many scientists would agree with about the domestication of cats. But let's keep reading. 28 to 31. Over thousands of years, cats shrank slightly in size, acquired a panoply of coat colors and patterns, and largely shed the antisocial tendencies of their past. Okay, that talks about the process of domestication, but it doesn't suggest what scientists would agree with about that. So I think we can get rid of B. 31 to 34. Domestic animals from cows to dogs have undergone similar transformations, yet scientists know relatively little about the genes involved. Well, that talks about the scientists, but it doesn't talk about the domestication of cats. 44 to 48. The analysis published recently in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences revealed 281 genes that show signs of rapid or numerous genetic changes, a hallmark of recent selections in domestic cats. So this is changes in domestic cats, but it's not, it says that this was published, but it doesn't say something about how scientists may or may not agree with the domestication of cats. So we're going to go with A. Let's go back and look at it. So we'll bracket it here. There, this is when the wildcats slunk out of the deserts and into villages, about 9,500 years ago, not long after people first took up farming in the Middle East. Okay, there, many scientists suspect they, the cats, mostly domesticated themselves, okay, with the friendliest ones able to take advantage of human table scraps and protection. Okay, that's the information that's going to help us answer this question. The passage suggests that some scientists would agree with which statement about the domestication of cats. It did not occur until after the domestication of cows and pigs. We don't get any information about the domestication of cows and pigs in this evidence. It caused cats to slightly increase in size. It did not. So if you had accidentally chosen this statement that cats shrank slightly in size, that statement was the wrong piece of evidence as we've suggested, but you might be tempted to pick this, but it's inaccurate. It was not intentionally undertaken by humans. That sounds right, that the cats domesticated themselves. Let's just double check here. It resulted from humans' need for pets. Nope, that's the opposite of what it says. So that cats just domesticated themselves. All right. Which choice best describes how Montague's team achieved the results? The said here was that they sequenced the genomes of 22 domestic cats representing a wide variety of breeds and locations, paired them with the genomes of 2 Near Eastern and 2 European wildcats. Okay. The team sequenced the genomes of 22 breeds of domestic cats from around the world. Good. Compared those genomes to one another. I don't think so. And identified the genes that appeared to have changed as a result of breeding. That is not what they did. The team used a previously published genome sequence of a domestic cat. Well, they did that, but that is not what's described over here in this 6th paragraph. To locate the genes associated with hearing and vision. Nope, that's discussed over here in the 5th paragraph. Compared those genes to the same genes in 2 species of wildcats and identified the point in time at which those genes appeared to have diverged. That is not what they did in the 6th paragraph. The team sequenced the genomes of several breeds of geographically diverse domestic cats. Okay, that sounds right. Compared those genomes to the genomes of 4 wildcats. Okay, from 2 locations. Good. And identified the genes that appeared to have changed due to domestication. That sounds right. That's the first one that's been accurate so far. The team sequenced the genomes of domestic cats from 2 locations. Nope, it said it was from a wide variety of breeds and locations, so that's wrong. Compared those genomes to the genomes of wildcats from the same locations. Nope. And identified which genes appeared to be geographically specific. Nope. That is not correct. So C is the correct answer here, 425. Okay, here's another COE pair. As presented in the passage, Montague's explanation, all right, We want to pay attention to Montagu's explanation for the gene changes in domestic cats. So his explanation about these gene changes in domestic cats is based on the assumption. All right, we have mentioned before that when you have a science passage and it mentions that some explanation or some answer is based on an assumption, what you're usually looking for is going to be evidence of the scientist relying on a previous study and applying those results to this study. So that's going to be the kind of information we're looking for in the evidence. So let's look at 37 to 41. The scientist started with the genome of a domestic cat, a female Abyssinian, that had been published in draft form in 2007, then filled in missing sequences and identified genes. That is promising because it's talking about a study that they started with. So we'll leave A as a possibility. 57 to 58. The researchers uncovered at least 13 genes that changed as cats morphed from feral to friendly. That doesn't talk about them relying on a previous study, so we're going to get rid of that. Remember, based on an assumption really means we're looking for a discussion of relying on a previous study. 59 to 63. Some of these, based on previous studies of knockout mice, genetically engineered mice, seem to play a role in cognition, including fear responses and the ability to learn new behaviors when given food rewards. Okay, that could also work. So we may be having to match which one's better between A and C. Let's look at 75 to 76. All right, we're hitting on genes that allow our brains to develop and make us interact socially. All right, this is not Montagu's explanation. This is Kirsten Lindblad-Toe's explanation about genes that the team identified that code for glutamate receptors, which play a key role in learning and memory, and may have been selected in humans as well. So that one also doesn't talk about depending on any kind of previous study. So we're down to A and C. Whoops. We're down to A and C. And now that they then filled in missing sequences, or whether they are using, let's see, the genes that are based on previous studies of knockout mice that seem to play a role in cognition, including fear responses. So which one matches best with an answer in 26? Okay, it's based on the assumption that genes associated with particular characteristics in one species are associated with similar characteristics in other species. That would work with C. So let's hold on to that as a good possibility. Missing sequences in the genome of one particular breed of cat can be completed by the parallel sequences in the genome of another breed of cat. That sounds like it would go with A, but let's see. All we have here is they started with the genome of a domestic cat that had been published, and then they filled in the missing sequences and then compared the resulting genome to those of cows, tigers, and dogs. But it doesn't say that they filled in the missing sequences or that it could be filled in by the parallel sequences in the genome of another breed of cat. That's just too far of a jump. We don't have enough information there. The number of genes affected by domestication is greater in some breeds of domestic cats than in other breeds. We don't have any information about that. Changes to the cat genome as a result of domestication occurred simultaneously with changes to genomes of other species associated with sociability. We don't have information about that in the evidence. So that means it's going to have to be this cross-species answer. Genes associated with particular characteristics in one species, the mice, are associated with similar characteristics in other species, the cats. So we got rid of A, even though they were depending on a previous study. We didn't get enough information out of the answer in 37 to 41 to be able to come to this answer in B. All right, according to the passage, the discovery that some genes in domestic cats influence the migration of neural crest cells is important because neural crest cells are. Let's go back and look at that discussion here. 5 genes in domestic cats that influence the migration of neural crest cells, stem cells in the developing embryo that affect everything from skull shape to coat color. This supports a recent proposal that such cells may be the master control switches of domestication. Okay, that seems to be important about why neural crest cells are important. Okay, neural crest cells are likely to be overlooked in analyses regarding the evolution of domestic animals. No information about that there. Potentially responsible for domestic animals' ability to thrive in harsh environments. I don't think we get anything about thriving in harsh environments. Thought to be fundamental to the overall process of the domestication of animals. That's much better. Considered to be critical to domestic animals' reproduction. We don't get anything about their reproduction, so we'll go with C. All right, common traits meant that it was some sort of shared physical characteristic. So is it mannerisms, widespread mannerisms? No. Inferior qualities, nothing about them being inferior. Familiar habits, it's not habits, it's not actions, it is features, characteristics. Okay. The author most likely included the quotation in the last sentence of the passage too. Okay, so the quotation is here. It's meaning by people, like dogs and other domesticates. Okay, to offer an alternative to generally accepted beliefs about the domestication of cats, that doesn't seem to be true, because earlier we have up here that most scientists agree or suspect that cats domesticated themselves. So that contradicts the rest of the passage. To suggest a potential explanation for the distinct way in which domestic cats developed, that could work, because the cats are given in contrast to dogs and other domesticates. That dogs and other domesticates were selected for a purpose, but cats were not, and it may suggest a potential explanation for the distinct cats developed. That could work. In order to provide a possible reason for the continual changes to the cat genome, there's really nothing about that in that quote. To qualify previously discussed findings about domestic animals. I don't think that's doing it either, because it's not qualifying or giving sort of caveats or reasons why maybe some of that information might be incorrect. So we're going to go with B. And that is the end of passage 3, the first science passage for the May 2018 reading test. This is passage 4, because it's a little bit more complicated. All right, let's look at this header. This is long, and so we want to make sure we get all the necessary information from it. It says that passage 1 was written by Stephen Douglas, so let's write Douglas here so that we remember. And the title is Defense of the Kansas-Nebraska Bill, so that's helpful, in 1854. So we already know that he's writing this in defense of the Kansas-Nebraska Bill. Douglas, a senator from Illinois, proposed a bill allowing voters in the new territories of Kansas and Nebraska to decide whether slavery should be permitted there. When enacted, the bill would effectively repeal the Missouri Compromise of 1820, which prohibited slavery in these territories. Passage 2 is adapted from a speech delivered in 1856 by Charles Sumner. So we'll write Sumner. The crime against Kansas. Sumner was a senator from Massachusetts. So we can refer back to the information in this header as we need to. Let's look at the questions about passage 1. As used in line 12, recognized most nearly means. Here's a words in context question. We'll go circle recognized. Right there. All right, now here is a COE pair, so we don't need to pay attention to that ahead of time. And this question is about passage 2. So let's go ahead and we're going to read passage 1 all the way. The argument of my opponents is predicated on the assumption that the policy of the fathers of the Republic was to prohibit slavery in all the territories ceded by the old states to the Union and made United States territory for the purpose of being organized into new states. I take issue upon that statement. All right, what statement is he taking issue with? That the founding fathers wanted to prohibit slavery everywhere in all the states ceded to the Union and made U.S. territory for the purpose of being new states. And he doesn't agree that the founding fathers wanted to prohibit slavery everywhere. You find upon the statute books under Washington and the early presidents provisions of law showing that in the southwestern territories the right to hold slaves was clearly implied or recognized, while in the Northwest territories it was prohibited. All right, we've got a contrast between recognized and prohibited. So recognized and prohibited are going to be opposites here. So it could be something like allowed. And then we've also got implied, clearly implied, or recognized. So the right to hold slaves was either clearly implied or recognized. And then in opposition to that, in the Northwest territories, it was prohibited. So we'll keep opposite of prohibited in our minds when we're trying to figure out the right word to replace recognized. The only conclusion that can be fairly and honestly drawn from that legislation is that it was the policy of the fathers of the Republic to prescribe a line of demarcation between free territories and slaveholding territories by a natural or a geographical line, being sure to make that line correspond, as near as might be, to the laws of climate, of production, and probably of all those other causes that would control the institution and make it either desirable or undesirable to the people inhabiting the respective territories. And so here he's saying that the founders wanted to draw a line between slave states and non-slave states, a line that made sense with geography and also made sense with whether the climate and the culture would want to hold slaves. Now I ask the friends and the opponents of this measure being the Kansas-Nebraska Act, to look at it as it is. Is not the question involved the simple one, whether the people of the territories shall be allowed to do as they please upon the question of slavery, subject only to the limitations of the Constitution? So he's saying here, the question is just if people in Kansas and Nebraska want to decide for themselves whether to be slave states or not. That is all the bill provides, and it does so in clear, explicit, and unequivocal terms. I do not wish to deal in any equivocal language, meaning confusing or language that could go either way. If the principle is right, let it be avowed and maintained. If it is wrong, let it be repudiated. Let all this quibbling about the Missouri Compromise, about the territory acquired from France, about the Act of 1820, be cast behind you. For the simple question is, will you allow the people to legislate for themselves upon the subject of slavery? Why should you not? All right, we're going to answer those questions and then try to figure out what his position is. So recognize, remember we said it's somehow in opposition to prohibited, and there was two options here, clearly implied or recognized. And we're talking about laws about owning slaves. So formally acknowledged, that could work. Publicly commended, no, it's not saying slavery is a wonderful thing was put on the law books. It was allowed. Plainly confessed, no, we're not confessing a crime. Accurately recalled, that means it's remembered, so that's not right. Formally acknowledged is correct. All right, here's the COE pair. In passage 1, Douglas implies, so this is an INS question, that legislators' consideration of the bill he has proposed has been clouded by. Okay, so what we're looking for in the evidence is something that talks about legislators' consideration of the Kansas-Nebraska Act and what it might have been clouded by. Now remember, we'll go back to the header here. He proposed a bill allowing voters in the new territories to decide. So when he's talking here, he's addressing the members, I believe the members of Congress. He was a senator, so he's probably addressing the Senate, or he may be addressing a joint Congress. So when he's talking about these legislators, they'll probably show up in the passage as the people he's talking to, you or y'all. Not that he would say y'all, but that's the idea. We're looking for something that's the people that he's addressing, that their consideration of the bill that he has proposed has been clouded by something. Okay, let's look at 25 to 29. Is not the question involved the simple one, whether the people of the territories shall be allowed to do as they please upon the question of slavery, subject only to the limitations of the Constitution? Okay, now he's not really addressing the Congress there, or the senators, and there's no suggestion of anything being clouded, so I think we can get rid of A. 29 to 32. That is all the bill provides, and it does so in clear, explicit, and unequivocal terms. I do not wish to deal in any equivocal language. He's saying he doesn't want to use equivocal or wishy-washy language, but he's not saying that the senators are using that, and he's not telling them or hinting in any way that their understanding or consideration is clouded. 32 to 33. If it is wrong, let it be repudiated. If the principle is right, let it be avowed and maintained. If it is wrong, let it be repudiated. That's just his statement about the bill. So it's going to have to be 33 to 36. Let's see. Let all this quibbling about the Missouri Compromise, about the territory acquired from France, about the Act of 1820 be cast behind you. Okay, so be cast behind you. This is really the only time that he, in these pieces of evidence, that he addresses the Senate. And you is the Senate. And so he wants them to stop quibbling, which means arguing about things that don't matter. All this silly arguing about, he wants them to stop arguing in silly ways about the Missouri Compromise, the territory acquired from France, the Act of 1820. He wants them to cast it behind them or to stop considering those arguments. So that's the only one that addresses the people that he's considering here, where it's the legislators' consideration. It has to be you or some version of, we know that he's talking to the legislators and not just describing his bill. And he's suggesting that there was some kind of clouding. So if he wants them to stop arguing about the Missouri Compromise and all those other laws, then maybe he thinks that those things are clouding their consideration. So what is it that is clouding their consideration? A moral dilemma inherent in the issue of slavery? No, they're not they're not arguing about slavery being right or wrong. Emphatic language that characterizes the text of the bill. Nope, he's not arguing about the text of the bill being too much one way or another. Discussion of issues that are fundamentally beside the point. That could work because he's arguing that all those other bills, the Missouri Compromise, and those issues are beside the point because he's saying that they are quibbling about them, which means that they're arguing about something that doesn't matter. Pre-existing loyalties and rivalries present among legislators. He's not addressing that in that statement. So C is the answer to 32. All right, now we're going to diagnose these questions. We'll go ahead and write COE here. Diagnose the questions for passage 2. The repetition of swindle in the first paragraph of passage 2 has the main effect of creating, this is a purpose function question, so let's go find where he says swindle a couple times that we'll pay attention to it. I'm not going to circle it every time because he says it a whole lot. So we're just going to pay attention to all of these uses of swindle and say what is the effect of each of these. What is the effect of using swindle this many times? All right. Now this is another COE pair that we don't have to worry about right now. And then over here, 37, in passage 2, Sumner indicates that under the Kansas-Nebraska bill, the national government had the authority to. This is a standalone C&C question. So under the Kansas-Nebraska bill, the national government had the authority to do something. So when we see the national government being mentioned, then we'll have to figure out what they are allowed to do under this bill. In the context of Sumner's argument, lines 76 to 77 serve primarily to. So this is a purpose function question. So let's bracket 76 to 77. Let's try that again. And it's not working. There we go. Okay. And we'll pay attention to what those lines serve to do. Now down here, we're already talking about Douglas and Sumner, so these are the synthesis questions, and we don't need to consider those right now. All right, let's read the second passage. But before we do that, let's decide what Douglas's main idea was. So we know that he is pro-Kansas-Nebraska bill. So the topic of this passage here is the Kansas-Nebraska bill. So I'm just going to say K-N bill. And the so what is Douglas says it's a simple question. And that is going downhill, but at least you can hopefully read it. He thinks that deciding on the Kansas-Nebraska bill is a simple question, and all it matters is that the residents in Kansas and Nebraska decide if they want to be slave states or not. Okay, now we'll go back to paying attention to repetition of swindle, what the national government had the authority to do under this bill, and the purpose of the lines 76 and 77. All right, so remember there is a senator from Massachusetts. He's arguing 2 years later than Douglas, and he adapted from a speech. The Nebraska bill, or the Kansas-Nebraska bill, was in every respect a swindle. It was a swindle by the South of the North. It was, on the part of those who had already completely enjoyed their share of the Missouri Compromise, a swindle of those whose share was yet absolutely untouched. It was a swindle of a broad territory, thus cheated of protection against slavery. It was a swindle of a great cause, early espoused by Washington, Franklin, and Jefferson, surrounded by the best fathers of the Republic life. Sir, it was a swindle of God-given inalienable rights. Turn it over, look at it on all sides, and it is everywhere a swindle. And if the word I now employ has not the authority of classical usage, it has, on this occasion, the indubitable authority of fitness. No other word will adequately express the mingled meanness and wickedness of the cheat. All right, so he's obviously using very strong words here. He's saying that everyone is being cheated by this Kansas-Nebraska bill. The South cheated the North with it. The people who had already decided on the Missouri Compromise back in 1820, they were swindling those whose share was yet untouched, so people in not in lands that had not been settled yet. It was a swindle of a broad territory. getting cheated out of their protection against slavery, a swindle of a great cause of presumably freedom from the fathers of the Republic. It was a swindle of God-given inalienable rights, and it's a swindle in every single way. And then here he's saying, now if this word isn't the way that people have classically used it, it still fits the situation. No other word can express the mingled meanness, and here I think this means more selfishness and wickedness of the cheat. So he's using this, in this context, strong word to make his point that it was the Kansas-Nebraska bill was a cheat. All right, now its character, the bill, was still further apparent to the general structure of the bill. And amid overflowing professions of regard for the sovereignty of the people in the territory, they were despoiled of every essential privilege of sovereignty. They were not allowed to choose their governor, secretary, chief justice, associate justices, attorney, or marshal, all of whom are sent from Washington. Here's the national government. Okay, this is the thing that the national government has the power to do under the Kansas-Nebraska Act. It's mentioning that they were sent from Washington, so that means Washington is sending all of these people for these government positions. Nor were they, the people who live in Kansas and Nebraska, allowed to regulate the salaries of any of these functionaries, the same people, or the daily allowance of the legislative body, or even the pay of the clerks and doorkeepers. But they were left free to adopt slavery. So what he's saying here is they're using the term popular sovereignty, but instead of allowing the people of Kansas and Nebraska to choose a lot of different things, which is what popular of the people sovereignty rule should mean, they're only allowed to choose for themselves whether or not to adopt slavery. They're not allowed to choose these other things. And this was called popular sovereignty. Time does not allow, nor does the occasion require, that I should stop to dwell on this transparent device to cover a transcendent wrong. Suffice it to say that slavery is in itself an arrogant denial of human rights, and by no human reason can the power to establish such a wrong be placed among the attributes of any just sovereignty. So he's saying, calling it popular sovereignty, you can't call something popular sovereignty when it's such a of human rights. So people deciding for themselves what to do, rule of the people, popular sovereignty. You can't call slavery, deciding for slavery, popular sovereignty, because it's sort of a contradiction in terms. All right, now here he has this phrase that we have to examine. In refusing it such a place, meaning that it can be called truly popular sovereignty, I do not deny popular rights, but uphold them. I do not restrain popular rights, but extend them. And so he's saying, I'm really trying to give people true popular sovereignty, and we can guess that maybe that means that he wants black people to have sovereignty over their own decisions as well, which of course white people in that state deciding for slavery would constitute popular sovereignty, but only by the white people, not by all of them. So he's saying he's trying to expand the meaning of popular sovereignty here. I do not restrain popular rights, but extend them. And sir, to this conclusion you must yet come, unless deaf not only to the admonitions of political justice, but also to the genius of our own Constitution, under which, when properly interpreted, no valid claim for slavery can be set up anywhere in the national territory. So he thinks that the Constitution can be, if it's interpreted properly, argues against slavery. Okay, let's answer these questions and we'll decide the topic and so what of Sumner. First, the COE pair. One of Sumner's central claims in passage 2 is that the Kansas-Nebraska bill had the effect of, we skipped the swindle, but let's go ahead and just do this COE pair real quick. So this is a CNC question. What was the effect of the Kansas-Nebraska bill? Okay, so we have to find a place of evidence where he's arguing about the effect of the Kansas-Nebraska bill. 45 to 46. All right. It was a swindle of a broad territory, thus cheated of protection against slavery. Okay, so that's basically what it says. That could be a possibility, that it has the effect of cheating the people in the territory. 58 to 61. Amid overflowing professions of regard for the sovereignty of the people in the territory, they were despoiled of every essential privilege of sovereignty. This is a little bit better, where they keep saying that we're just trying to let the people decide for themselves. The Kansas-Nebraska bill actually took away ways for them to decide. And then we get the example of them not being able to appoint their own people, but Washington sends them instead. So B looks a little bit better than A here. 72 to 76. Suffice it to say that slavery is in itself an arrogant denial of human rights, and by no human reason can the power to establish such a wrong be placed among the attributes of any just sovereignty. There he's talking about slavery itself and not about the Kansas-Nebraska bill. Lines 78 to 83. So we can't choose that one. And, sir, to this conclusion you must yet come, unless deaf, not only to the admonitions of political justice, but also to the genius of our own Constitution, under which, when properly interpreted, no valid claim for slavery can be set up anywhere in the national territory. So here he's not saying the effect of the Kansas-Nebraska bill. He's saying you, whoever I'm talking to, need to come to the same conclusion that I am coming to. So that's not going to be the correct answer. So we're leaning towards B, where he says the effect of the Kansas-Nebraska bill was to promise popular sovereignty but actually take it away. And then A is also a possibility, 45 to 46, that it was a swindle of a broad territory, thus cheated of protection against slavery. So either the answer is going to be something about taking away the protection of slavery, protection against slavery from a group of people, or it's going to be about taking away of people to decide for themselves. Let's see what we have here. One of Sumner's central claims is that the Kansas-Nebraska bill had the effect of disrupting the balance of authority between slaveholding and non-slaveholding territorial governments. That's not what he's talking about in either of those places. Depriving a federal policy that enjoyed widespread popularity of its legitimacy. He's not talking about other federal policies here or about taking legitimacy away. Disenfranchising citizens in territories where the Missouri Compromise had yielded no obvious benefits. He's not talking about places where in areas of the Missouri Compromise. He talks about that elsewhere, but not in these pieces of evidence. Giving the impression that the rights of citizens in certain territories were being expanded when they were in fact being curtailed. Yes, this is the correct answer, and it goes with B. So we'll cross out A, because that's what he's saying here in B. He's saying it's giving the impression that we're expanding the rights of citizens, giving them, quote, popular sovereignty, but they're in fact taking away some of those rights. All right, let's go back to this question about swindle. It had the main effect of creating what? And it looks like these are all tone questions. A skeptical tone that reveals Sumner's distrust of his fellow senators. I don't think he's saying he distrusts his fellow senators. An outraged tone that expresses Sumner's indignation over the Kansas-Nebraska bill. That could work. A pessimistic tone that reflects Sumner's conviction that the Kansas-Nebraska Act cannot be repealed. He's not talking about whether it can be repealed here. An aggrieved tone that shows Sumner's sense of betrayal over the Founding Fathers' support for slavery. Nope, I don't think he's arguing that the Founding Fathers did support slavery, because in the end he says that if you read the Constitution carefully, there's no room for slavery there. So the outrage tone seems to work best. All right, this standalone question about under the Kansas-Nebraska bill, the national government had the authority. The national government here is Washington. All these people are sent from Washington, the Chief Justice, Associate Justices, Attorney, or Marshal. The national government had the authority to regulate commerce in the territories? No. Enforce territorial laws concerning slavery? Not in that section, he's not talking about that. Mediate disputes between territorial governments? No. Appoint officials to territorial posts. There we go. All right, in the context of his argument, 76 to 77, where he says up here, in refusing it such a place, remember, in refusing popular sovereignty, the place of being defined only as deciding for a state deciding for themselves about slavery or not. In refusing it such a place, I do not deny popular rights, but uphold them. Okay, what do these lines do? Reiterate that he shares certain fundamental values with supporters of slavery? Definitely not. Provide an explanation for his claims about the historical legacy of slavery? I don't think he's making claims about the legacy of slavery. Rephrase an opinion on abolition that he offered earlier in his speech. I don't think he's doing that either. Argue that his position on slavery constitutes authentic popular sovereignty. Yes, he's trying to redefine popular sovereignty and show that using the words as the people who wrote the Kansas-Nebraska bill are using them is actually not how you should be using popular sovereignty, because it's sort of a contradiction in terms, as I mentioned. All right. Now that we've looked at Sumner's argument, we know it's still about the Kansas-Nebraska. So we'll write that. That's the topic. And the so what? That it took away people's rights. I think that's his main idea here. All right. So now we know that they disagree on the Kansas-Nebraska bill, and Douglas just thinks that it's a simple question. just saying, shouldn't we just let people decide for themselves about slavery? And Sumner's saying, even just by definition, popular sovereignty restricts people's rights instead of granting them. All right. Which choice best identifies a distinction in how Douglas and Sumner characterize the Kansas-Nebraska bill? So let's just look at the Douglas answers and see if we can toss any out. Douglas characterizes it as straightforward in its intent. Yeah, that's where he says it's a simple question. While Sumner characterizes it as fundamentally deceptive. Yep, that seems like it works. Let's just look at the other ones to try to prove them wrong. Douglas sees it as safeguarding the interests of the slaveholding territories. Maybe. I don't know if he says that outright. While Sumner sees it as unfairly burdening those territories. Nope, I don't think he says that. Oh, and we ended up actually looking at Sumner and Douglas in these, didn't we? Oh well. Douglas characterizes it as progressive in its treatment of the issue of slavery. He does not do that, so we don't even need to read what Sumner does. Douglas regards it as deeply relevant to key national concerns, possibly, while Sumner regards it as largely irrelevant to those concerns. That's definitely not true. Okay, so our initial idea of A is correct. Sumner would most likely fault the simple question in lines 36 to 37 proposed by Douglas in passage 1 for being what? So this is basically saying, how would Sumner describe Douglas's quote-unquote simple question? Let's just go read this. For the simple question is, will you allow the people to legislate for themselves upon the subject of slavery? Why should you not? Okay. And how did Sumner feel about the question of allowing the people to legislate for themselves? Well, number one, the bill actually ended up taking away the rights of those very same people that Douglas wanted to allow to legislate for themselves, since it took away their rights to make all sorts of other decisions about their territory, but also it wasn't considering the rights of the black people in that territory. They were not allowed to decide for themselves, and so it really was not true popular sovereignty. So that's what he's saying in his passage. So we've got to pick the closest answer. Okay, so Sumner would characterize the simple question as biased, since it places the interests of territories over those of established states. I don't think he's making that distinction. Irrelevant, since territorial citizens already have the freedom to legislate on local matters. No, he's really saying that the bill took away that freedom. Misleading, that seems to go well with swindle, right? Since it fails to acknowledge that certain provisions of the Kansas-Nebraska bill are unrelated to territorial sovereignty. That could work. But I'm not sure that it's the unrelated to territorial sovereignty. I don't know if he argues that in there. Immoral, since it focuses on the political rights of territorial citizens at the expense of human rights of slaves. Yes, that's what we're going for. He's saying that the citizens are getting these rights, but the human rights of slaves are not being considered. All right, which choice best identifies a key difference in how Douglas and Sumner make use of the Constitution? All right, each of them only mention it once. Douglas mentions it down here, where he says, is not the question, we're on 25, involved the simple one, whether the people of the territories shall be allowed to do as they please upon the question of slavery, subject only to the limitations of the Constitution? All right, so there, Douglas is saying, people should just be able to decide for themselves as long as they're not going against the Constitution. And then Sumner over here says, to this conclusion you must yet come, unless deaf not only to the admonitions of political justice, but also to the genius of our own Constitution, under which, when properly interpreted, no valid claim for slavery can be set up anywhere in the national territory. Okay, so Sumner is saying that if you look at the Constitution correctly, it does not allow for slavery at all. So let's find the correct answer here. What's the key difference? Douglas suggests that the Constitution must be adapted to address the present circumstances. Nope, he is not suggesting that the Constitution be adapted. Douglas suggests that the Constitution's provisions for slavery are open to interpretation, whereas Sumner asserts that the Constitution's stance on slavery is unambiguous. I don't know that Sumner asserts that the Constitution's stance on slavery is unambiguous, because he does say when interpreted correctly. And so I think he may be saying there that some people may not interpret it in the same way. And I don't see really anywhere in the passage Douglas suggesting that the Constitution's provisions for slavery are open to interpretation, because he is just saying here, shouldn't they be allowed to decide subject only to the limitations of the Constitution? He's not saying that we need to think about what the Constitution says and maybe interpret it differently. Douglas suggests that the Constitution's restrictions on slavery do not apply to the territories. He does not suggest that, because he wants them to be subject to the limitations of the Constitution. Douglas suggests that slavery may be permitted in the territories without violating the Constitution. There we go. Whereas Sumner insists that slavery is not compatible with the ideals of the Constitution. There we go. That is the correct answer. All right, so that is the paired passage global conversation, the fourth passage for this test. This is the last passage. It is a science passage with a graph, so this would be another for the eject cord. What does the header say? It says the title is Staring Back to Cosmic Dawn. Okay, so something about the long past. Let's start diagnosing these questions. Over the course of the passage, the main focus shifts from, so this is a developmental pattern question, which means that we need to be paying attention to a shift in focus. Here's a standalone COE that we don't need to look at in detail right now. Based on the passage, what can reasonably be inferred? So this is an inference question, a standalone inference question. What can reasonably be inferred about galaxies billions of years ago? And we know this is going to be near the beginning, definitely before line 31, or most likely before line 31. So we're looking for information that we can infer about galaxies billions of years ago. This is a words and context question, so we'll look at document in 31. Circle that. In the context of the research described in the passage, type 1A or IA supernovae may be useful because they could allow astronomers to. This is a standalone C&C question. So we're looking for, somewhere after line 31, what these type 1A supernovae could allow astronomers to do. All right, line 48, patch most nearly means. All right, words and context. Based on the passage, this is a COE pair. So we don't need to consider that right now. The reference to the full moon in line 63 primarily serves to purpose function question. So let's look at line 63. Something about the full moon. So we're saying, why did they reference it? And then we've got these graph questions, which we don't need to consider right now. All right, so we're paying attention to the shift over the course of the passage. We're looking for what can be inferred about galaxies billions of years ago, the meaning of document, what type 1 or IA supernovae may allow astronomers to do, patch, and why they referred to the full moon in line 63. All right, first, where is this shift? It is right here, if I could correctly draw it. It's really a shift from describing the possibilities of the information that we don't know yet about the beginning of the universe, and then all of the ways that they are using the Hubble Space Telescope to try to find out information about that. So a shift is not always going to be in the middle. Don't let that throw you off. So if there's a shift, again, try to write a line, probably straighter than mine, across the part of the passage where you find the shift. All right, let's look for this inference question. What can reasonably be inferred about galaxies billions of years ago? What we got in here was these deep HUDF images revealed some of the most distant galaxies ever found, and we have to infer that because they are distant, they are galaxies from millions of years or billions of years ago. And we can get that from going back here. If the earliest galaxies made of the earliest stars at cosmic dawn, at the outer limits of the capabilities of the Hubble Space Telescope, and it also says up here that it is a time machine. So being able to look at these galaxies is not just looking at them far away, but looking at them a long time ago. So what do we find out? Which look very different than nearby galaxies. I think that's all that we're going to find there. All right, what does document mean here? We design candles primarily to document what? The first 1/3 of galaxy evolution. Okay, so they are trying to write down information about the early parts of galaxy evolution using this candles program. All right, what can type IA supernovae allow astronomers to do? We've got these mentioned right here. and they're defined as exploding white dwarf stars that are the best known standard candles for, I guess this would be for astronomers, measuring the universe's recent expansion rate. Candles could then thus test whether type Ia supernovae are also a valid yardstick for the early universe. So if they're a valid yardstick now for the universe's expansion rate, they want to find out if those type Ia supernovae can help us understand expansion rates of the early universe. So that helps us with that C&C question. Patch in line 48. Candles targeted 5 patches of the northern and southern skies, each about 1/4 the angular size of the Orion Nebula. Each patch has been well studied from radio to X-rays, giving plenty of complementary data across the electromagnetic spectrum. All right, and up here they said 5 patches of the northern and southern skies. I think they just mean section by patch here. And then why did they reference the full moon? Right here. Although candles surveyed a total area of only about that of the full moon, the long exposures looked so deep into the cosmos that they recorded roughly 250,000 ancient galaxies in enough detail to reveal their sizes, shapes, and even gross internal structures. Okay, so they're using the full moon as some sort of size here so that we can imagine the section of the night sky, how big of an area that would take up. All right, so let's go ahead and answer these questions. Over here first, the main focus shifts from, all right, how would we describe this? It was something about describing what the beginning of the universe was like. So we'll try to find something like that. An example of data collected using the Hubble Space Telescope, shifting from that to a discussion of design flaws that led to replacing several No. There's nothing about design flaws that are replacing instruments. And it doesn't start out with an example of collected data. An explanation of a new theory of star formation, maybe. 2, an experiment using the HST designed to test the validity of that theory. That could work. A list of the author's accomplishments? Nope. That's not what's happening at the beginning. An overview of the capabilities of the HST? 2, a discussion of research undertaken that utilized those capabilities. Now let's see. I don't think we would call this an overview of the capabilities of the HST. It's telling us some of the things it can do, but the main part of this paragraph is them wondering if they can use it to find out this other information, which is this new theory of star formation. So that gets tossed out there, and B is the answer. All right, standalone COE. Which choice best supports the conclusion that the first galaxies formed less than 1 billion years after the Big Bang? Okay, so the Big Bang happened, and then the first galaxies formed less than 1 billion years after that. Lines 1 to 4. The Hubble Space Telescope, HST, is a time machine, staring not only billions of light years into the depths of space, but also billions of years back in time. Nothing about when the galaxies were forming there. 4 to 8. With its extraordinarily sensitive detectors above Earth's shrouding and blurring atmosphere, HST can witness the peak of star formation at cosmic high noon, which ended about 5 billion years after the Big Bang. Okay, we've got 5 billion years after the Big Bang, but that doesn't help us support the conclusion that the first galaxies formed less than 1 billion years after the Big Bang. And at the outer limits of its capabilities, we wondered if it could detect the faintest candles of creation, the earliest galaxies made of the earliest stars at cosmic dawn, when the universe was less than 1 billion years old. There we go. That's the one that's going to help. Let's just double check it. 22 to 24. Those deep HUDF images revealed some of the most distant galaxies ever found, which looked very different than nearby galaxies. That doesn't tell us about when they were formed. So C is the answer. All right, what did we learn about those galaxies from billions ago? We learned that the very distant galaxies, which looked very different than nearby galaxies. And we could infer that distant galaxies were also longer ago from the information up here. So they look very different than nearby galaxies. They looked very different from galaxies today. That seems to look good. They were dominated by type Ia supernovae. Nope, that was talked about later. They were grouped together in one location in the sky. Doesn't say that there. They were much larger than astronomers had expected. Also does not say that there. All right, so A is the answer. In line 31 document, we were saying that they were trying to write down the information about the first 1/3 of galaxy evolution. So record works best here. Record the first 1/3 of galaxy evolution. That works. They're not producing it, they're not defining it, and they're not constructing it. All right. What about type Ia supernovae would be useful to astronomers? What could it allow them to do? They are used right now for measuring the universe's recent expansion rate, and they want to test whether they could be a valid yardstick for the early universe. So they're used right now for the expansion rate of the current universe. Could they be used for the early universe? Determine the expansion rate of the universe soon after the Big Bang. Very promising. More accurately calibrate other methods of measuring distance. They're not talking about measuring distance there. Better understand what causes the white dwarf stars to explode. Nope. Catalog the earliest known galaxies according to their physical properties. Nope. So A is the answer. All right, we need to look at patch, which remember we said was something like section. And so region works best here. It's not a covering, an allotment, or a connection. All right, here's this COE here. Based on the passage, the authors would most likely, so this is an INS question with the COE, would most likely say that conducting deep all-sky surveys to obtain information about ancient galaxies is something. Okay, so we've got to find a place in the evidence where they give their opinion about conducting deep all-sky surveys in order to obtain information about ancient galaxies. So let's look at 39 to 45. Candles became the largest observing program ever undertaken by Hubble. The telescope devoted 600 hours, fully 10% of its observing time, to candles for 3 years, surveying an area of sky 60 times larger than the HUDF, albeit to brighter limiting magnitudes, about 27 for candles compared to 30 for the HUDF. Okay, so say what the author's opinion would be necessarily, and it doesn't talk about an all-sky survey. So I don't think A is going to help us. 51 to 53. Because remote galaxies are so faint, the 5 target areas were away from our Milky Way's star-studded plane. That's not talking about all-sky surveys. I don't think that's going to be helpful. 3 to 58. Much as pollsters and medical researchers learn about the human population as a whole by studying carefully selected samples of a small number of individuals, we chose the 5 target areas because they're physically representative of the universe at large. Oh, okay. So this might be, because it's an inference question, this might be sort of a backwards saying you don't have to do all sky surveys, because if you just do these little target areas, just as a pollster would use a small sample to make a conclusion about a large group, we can choose and look at just these 5 small target areas because they represent the universe at large. That could help. What's the last one? 67 to 69. Such a rich treasure trove, and they're talking about all the photos that they were able to get, provides powerful new data for statistical studies of galaxy growth and evolution. Nothing about all sky surveys. So I think C is going to be the best that we're going to get here. So we'll get rid of D. So if they're saying that you can just take samples of the sky and you'll get enough information about the universe at large, what would be their opinion about conducting deep all-sky surveys? It would be that it is unnecessary. They would actually say it's impractical. There's no reason to do that. They would not say it's justified. They wouldn't say it's incomplete because it would be giving you complete information. It's just not necessary. All right, why is it that they referenced the full moon? Remember we said it was something to do with size comparison, so that, yeah, I think that's what they're doing there, size comparison. So, to give readers a sense of the size of the area investigated by candles, that looks good. To identify the direction the Hubble Space Telescope was directed while collecting data for the HUDF. Don't think so. To help readers understand how images are processed by the wide field camera, it doesn't help us do that or discuss that. To show how much farther away from Earth ancient galaxies are than the moon is. It's not trying to do that. So we've got A. All right, let's look at this graph. Star formation rate measured by solar masses per year per 5 cubic megaparsecs. I don't think we need to understand, because they didn't define it in the passage, we don't need to understand 5 cubic megaparsecs, but we do need to understand that these numbers, 0, 5, 10, 15, correspond to star formation rate. That's all we need to know here. The Big Bang is at 0, now is at 13.7 billion years. Up here is these red shifts. We don't have to understand what these are either, We just have to know that these different numbers happen at these different times, whatever that means. Cosmic dawn is this gray area here, and cosmic high noon is the black area, and then the white area is the time since 5 billion years after the Big Bang. All right, let's look at these graphs, or the questions. According to the figure, which choice is a possible redshift of a galaxy made of stars that formed during cosmic dawn? Cosmic dawn is just this gray, so it would either have to be 9 or 6, and 6 is really right at the edge, so I would go with 9, and there's 9. They don't even give us 6 as an answer option, which is nice because that would be hard to choose. Astronomers estimate that the sun formed about 8.5 billion years after the Big Bang. According to the figure, what was the star formation rate in solar masses per year per 5 cubic megaparsecs at the time the sun formed? Now remember, I think they're really just including this information to make it more confusing. We don't need to understand what that means. We just need to look at star formation rate at 8.5 billion years after the Big Bang. So where is that going to be? All right, 8.5 million years, there's a little dot. So that's the one we're looking at, and we'll go across here, and it looks like it's at about 4. It's closer to 5 than to 0. So we want something but 3, 4, or 4.5 or something like that. And there we go, 4.0. 1.0 is too small, 1.5 is too small, 6.5 is too big. All right, that is the end of the May 2018 reading test. And we will see you next time for the written language.